Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and as always, I am happy to be with you on this Tuesday for another author interview. First of all, I will say happy Thanksgiving week. We are getting very close to Turkey Day, and you know, like so many other things, Thanksgiving is probably going to be a little different for many of us than it has been in years past. I actually really love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas as well, but I'm not one that likes to jump directly from Halloween to Christmas and ignore Thanksgiving. I really love Thanksgiving. I do acknowledge and recognize that the history of Thanksgiving is problematic. I'm not terribly thrilled with a lot of the history there. I much prefer what Thanksgiving has kind of turned into, which is, time to spend with family and friends, a time to focus on what we are grateful for, the blessings that we have in our life. I wish that Thanksgiving could just be that it was, not based in all of the history, but unfortunately it is. And so we do need to hold that intention with the day and remember that our Native brothers and sisters are, still not as well off as they could be, and their history is an issue. So happy Thanksgiving, but just know that, like many things in life, that it comes with some darker sides. I actually read a book this week that was about Thanksgiving. I'm so excited. I wish I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, since I do want to get to the interview. But if you've listened before, you know that I'm often looking for holiday-themed books, and this time of year, everything is Christmas, which is cool. But even when I find books that have Thanksgiving in them, it's usually the book starts at Thanksgiving and then leads up to Christmas. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, if I want to read a book around Thanksgiving that's set at Thanksgiving, that's what I'm looking for. And this book actually was. The entire book took place on the day after Thanksgiving, actually, but it was a quilting group, and they got together and they had their own celebration, and they did a kind of ritual of sharing what they were grateful for. And I've talked about this series before. It's the Elm Creek Quilters. I don't know why I can't say that. And it's by Jennifer Chiaverini. And this one was it just called The Holiday Quilt? I think it was called The Holiday Quilt, but it had a cornucopia on the front of it. And so I thought, hey, I bet this one is about Thanksgiving, and it was. So yay. And it's always fun to read a book in a series and see how the story and the characters have evolved since the last book I read. And I did read this one completely out of order because it was like number 15, and I've only read the first few. So lots of spoilers. I found a lot about people in the series that I learned it, sooner than I probably should have. But that is okay, because yay for a Thanksgiving book. Okay. Moving on to the book and the author that we are talking about and talking to today. The book is Life in the Hollywood Lane. The author is Ann Crawford, and the description on the back of the book is this. Trish, an LA actor, is bereft after her best friend commits suicide. Glamorous yet tough as nails Hollywood is Trish's backdrop, and a reflection for her as she stumbles on through an actor's life of casting calls and premieres, rejection and acceptance. Slowly, Trish releases the idea of how her life should be and embraces the messy, flawed, yet stunningly beautiful truth of how it is. Trish's humorous resilience and acceptance lead to transformation, surrender, and ultimately love. Author Ann Crawford's trademark optimism for life and love shine through in this inspiring story that reminds us all that no matter what the question, love is always the answer. Life in the Hollywood Lane is chock-a-block with LOL and aha moments. Also, know any folks who've been chasing a long-held dream? Do them a favor and gift them this book. So that is the blurb on the back of the book, and a couple of things just from that blurb. First of all, massive points for using the word chock-a-block in the blurb. Love it. And then also, that first sentence, Trish, an LA actor, is bereft after her best friend commits suicide. That might not make you want to pick up a book, right? And yet, as Anne will talk about in the interview, this book is, yes, it deals with some dark sides of life. It deals with the death of a friend, not only the death of a friend, but death by suicide. And yet, this book is full of warmth and humor and so many good things. The writing style sounds like the voice in my head sometimes when the voice in my head is just going off on a tangent. Trish is, Trish talks like we talk. When you tell a story, you don't just tell a story. Most people don't just tell a story and say, okay, so this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. This perfectly consecutive events, perfectly chronological order, right? You start off a story, and something in that story reminds you of something that happened 10 years ago, but it's relevant. And so you talk about that. And then you come around and talk about something else. That's how this story is. And I might not be describing it correctly because it is well written, and it doesn't feel like you're reading this like meandering random tale told by your inside voice. Man, that's a backwards compliment. It's not meant to be a backhanded compliment. It's well written, it's fun, it's engaging. I just like the way that Trish's voice is throughout the book. I'm going to shut up now and let Anne talk about the book because I'm just painting myself into a corner. Let's turn now to the interview with Ann Crawford. And again, the book is called Life in the Hollywood Lane.
Hi, Ann. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am glad to have you here, and we are here to talk about your book, Life in the Hollywood Lane. Before we get to the book, though, if you could start by sharing a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Well, I live in Colorado. I've lived all over, though. I've lived in every continental time zone. I grew up on the East Coast, lived on the West Coast. I met my husband on eHarmony and moved to Kansas for him, and he happened to have 2 teenagers at the time. And then we moved to Colorado 11 years ago, so loving it here. And we travel a lot when there's not a pandemic going on. And I've been writing since I could hold a pencil at age 3.
Oh, wow.
That's my true love.
Nice. Do you have snow yet in Colorado?
No, we've had a few snowfalls, but it didn't stick around very long.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, the book is called Life in the Hollywood Lane. Can you give an overview of the story?
Sure. I worked in talent management a bunch of years ago, and where we submitted our actors for auditions for movies and TV shows, and it was career-making things, a lot of them. And one of our actors committed suicide. And she was so beautiful, so talented, funny, smart, it was a shock to everybody. And over the next couple of years, her story came to me. And I wanted her to be the heroine of her story, no matter how her journey ended. And so that's where the idea came from. And working in talent management, our actors, they worked so hard. Auditions, classes, working out, speech, things, everything you could imagine. They were just devoted to their craft, and they'd go to audition after audition, and most of the time they'd get a no, but they kept hanging in there. And I loved them so much, and I wanted to honor that journey that we don't really hear about too much. We just hear about the movie stars who make it look like it was so easy, but it wasn't. So Life in the Hollywood Lane is about Trish, who's an actor in LA, does the audition thing over and over and over. And her bestie, Cindy, is the one who committed suicide. And Trish just wonders if they were roommates, and she wonders if there was anything she could have done, anything she could have said. Hollywood is really, for women, it's tough when you get over 40. And Cindy killed herself the night before her 40th birthday. And so it's really sad and poignant and touching. It's about Trish's journey of grief, but it's also really funny. And that's, all my books are like that, really deep and really funny. Kind of like life.
Exactly. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that because, that is like life. Bad things happen, good things happen, funny things happen. So how, when you're writing, do you kind of try to navigate that balance between the lighter and the darker sides of the story?
Well, someone whose opinion I really respect wrote to me not too long ago, and she said, your use of humor is majestic. The way you use it to get in subtle and deep points, to drive a point home, to let a reader sit with the pain that someone's going through, and then lightly bring them out of it, it makes the point that much more taken, I guess, is how she meant. And so I that was a very high compliment. But it is kind of like life. I remember the night my mom died, I was 17, and my dad came home from the hospital, and my sister and he and I stayed up until about 2 or 3 in the morning laughing, telling jokes in the kitchen. I mean, it's what we do as humans. We laugh through these really rough times, and we go back and forth. I remember after 9/11, I heard some comedians say that they really wish that they had taken another career path, like that they were first responders. And I thought, oh my goodness, no, not you. We need to laugh now more than ever. And now in this pandemic and with all this craziness going on, we definitely need to laugh more than ever now too. So that's what I give, laughing and deep depths. Deep depths.
Okay. I like it.
Deep depths. Points for alliteration. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking more about Trish as the main character of the book Life in the Hollywood Lane. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with Ann Crawford about one of her new novels. It is called Life in the Hollywood Lane. Let's go ahead and return to that interview with Ann.
Let's talk a little bit more about Trish then, as the main character. It's Cindy's story, but told through Trish's perspective because she is the one who's left alive. what about Trish do you think will resonate with readers?
Well, that she had a dream and she didn't give up, and she did finally get to a certain level of success, and where she realized that success doesn't necessarily mean the floodlights and the name and lights and all that, but to be happy with where you're at and to do what you love and to have people in your life that you love and who love you, and that success the definition of success changed for her, but she still didn't give up her dreams. She kept going for it. So that'll resonate.
Yeah. One thing that I love about the book is that Trish just sort of babbles her way through the book. Not, and that sounds rude, but it's not. Like sometimes reading the book is like being inside my own head because that's how Trish
right.
talks.
And as Trish said, many a truth is said in babble.
Yes, she's got great one-liners. What do you? I haven't read any of your other books, unfortunately. But do you typically write like this, or is this more of Trish's personality?
Well, it's definitely more of Trish's personality, the babbling. But I do go on in people's heads a lot. I have 5 other books up on Amazon. 2 of them won very prestigious awards. One is Angels on Overtime. Another is Fresh Off the Starship. And then I have 2 kind of serious, those are funny and deep. And then I have 2 kinds of serious ones. One's about Mary Magdalene, and another is called Spellweaver, about a woman during the witch hunts in Scotland. And then I have a nonfiction about visioning. But they're all about, finding your inner truth and living from there.
Did you do any research for the book?
Well, for Life in the Hollywood Lane, not really. I mean, I lived that when I lived in LA, working in talent management, and it was so much fun. I mean, the red carpet nights, the premieres, having actors land a really wonderful audition. I've had some of my folks have been on major shows like Grey's Anatomy and other big shows like that. Main movies. One actor got into a movie called Trafficked, which is a really profound movie. I recommend seeing that. It's not a happy topic, but it's about human trafficking in this country. It's very touching, and she did a great job. So I lived that. And then for other books, for Spellweaver, about the witch hunts, I actually had to research being burned at the stake and instruments of torture that witch hunters would use. That was not a fun topic. I'm on Instagram, and a lot of writers joke about our browser history. Don't worry about my browser history. I'm a writer. we wrote the craziest things.
Yeah. Talking about crazy times, that was definitely a crazy time, and we could talk for an hour or more about just the witch hunts. But so obviously there are some, since you did live a lot of this, there are some autobiographical elements in the book since you drew on your own experience. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Well, I never pursued acting. I have done stand-up comedy and improv. So there's a chapter about improv, and that's firsthand experience. The section is called Almost Every Great Thing About My Life I Learned in Improv. About how to be a team player, about how to give your teammates gifts so that they can shine. It's really a great metaphor for life. And the woman I based go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say one thing that I always think of from improv is yes, and.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Definitely. That's a great metaphor for life. Yes, and instead of no, but, or but no.
right. Right. And I'm sorry. And then you said the woman that you based.
um, Cindy on did stand-up comedy, and it was so funny. I saw her on YouTube, and it's just some of these beautiful, bright lights who choose to snuff out their light. It's just shocking. Robin Williams, I actually understand why he wanted to leave. My brother had a neurological disease, and he slowly lost control of his mind and ultimately his body and everything. And I understand Robin wanting to leave before all that happened. He had a very bad sickness too.
Is this your most recent book, or do you have? When I looked on Amazon, there was a book ahead of it in the line, so I wasn't sure if that had come out since this one.
Yeah, Fresh Off the Starship came out since Life in the Hollywood Lane. That's about a friendly alien who was trained and was meant to go to Washington, D.C., where she could help humanity on a grand geopolitical scale. But something happened and she got diverted to Kansas. And she wakes up like, what is this? What am I doing here? And of course, nobody knows that she's an alien. They think she's their old family member who just has amnesia after a car accident. So it's really funny, and it's also very deep and very profound. I'm an award-winning filmmaker too, and for one of my documentaries, I went to Vietnam with a group of vets, and I filmed them going back to where they'd been stationed and doing humanitarian work and healing their wounds of war. And some of their stories were so horrific. And I do, a couple of the dads in Fresh Off the Starship are Vietnam vets, and I put some of the stories in there. What some of us have to live through, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we have to laugh.
Yes.
So we don't
yes,
go
we do.
super crazy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. What then are you working on now?
I have a top New York agent helping me with the rewriting of my current book. And she's really, I've never had anybody do this before, patiently guide me through turning a book from really good to outstanding. And this book is about 3 generations of women, a hippie grandmother, an evangelical mom, conservative evangelical mom, and a trans daughter, and all under one roof. What could go right?
Wow.
So that is also very funny and very deep. They deal with a lot of social issues, and the mom has a lot of trouble with her daughter's decision, transition and everything. And the grandmother is just like the spoiler. She's the, oh, what does gender matter anyway? They can put it on every morning like a new set of clothes.
Right.
So she's really cool about it. And the grandmother and granddaughter are very close. And but like I said, it's also very funny, very deep, very relevant, very now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's practically done. And she's shopping it in New York right now.
Wonderful. Yeah, I like your sentence of what could go right. I mean,
Right.
I can only imagine the tension in that family.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do have people. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I do have people in the inner circle of my life, like all 3 of them, hippies, evangelicals, and trans people. So I've had myriad conversations with all of them. So it's a lot of it is based on what's really happened, or true stories, fictionalized and put into fictional characters. And the other thing about this book is a lot of people around trans people could be really confused and befuddled, And my book is kind of a primer to help them, and it gives them the potential to be allies instead of being so confused.
Mhm. And it also has just the fact that it has a trans person in it, representation matters, and for people to see themselves in a novel, just a novel about family is really, really great.
Right, true. Yeah, great point.
I love books about family, and I love books that have characters that give representation to people who don't often see themselves in books, and especially in books as just, a person, because that is what we all are, and we need to see ourselves as people, as family, as, characters represented in the books that we love. So I love that. Let's go ahead and take our second break of the podcast, and when we come back, more with author Ann Crawford. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the conclusion of my interview with author Ann Crawford. We started talking about her book, Life in the Hollywood Lane. We've talked about some of her other books, and we were just speaking about the book that she is currently working on. So let's go ahead and get back to the interview with Ann.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you've been writing since you were 3 and could hold a pencil, so it's obviously something you've always wanted to do. How did that evolve throughout your life? I mean, you are a filmmaker, so I would imagine you've written in various capacities throughout your life. How did it end up for you writing books for publication?
Well, I want to say when I was 3, when I was really young, my mom was so sick my whole childhood. And the times she would read to me were very special times. And so books always held this magic for me of warmth and love. And I've always wanted to carry that magic to other people. And it's kind of interesting. I never ended up writing children's books, but I just always knew I'd be a writer. And in my 20s, that's when I started my first book, and I got an agent right away. And she said, I can't believe this is your first book. I'm going to sell it this summer. Well, that didn't happen. But I ended up writing other books, and one did get published. And then Amazon came along, and you could self-publish. So I put them all up myself. And then this current one will be traditionally published through a big publishing house. So that'll be a fun experience.
Yeah, which means that you have a very good knowledge of, both self-publication and more traditional publishing routes. So from your experience, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Absolutely. The main thing is if it's yours to do, it'll get done. I have a friend who is writing a book, and she was just filled with angst, and she's a therapist. She's a very gifted therapist, and she just had it in her head that this was what she was supposed to do too. Well, maybe she will sometime, but if it's yours to do, it'll get done. And if it has your name on it, like writing a book, but you're procrastinating. I mean, the main advice is what somebody said, the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair. Just show up every day at an appointed hour. That makes it the easiest, I think. If you show up at the same time every day, even if it's for 10 minutes, even if it's that, if that's all somebody can fit in a very busy schedule, after a while it becomes like Pavlov's dog. You sit down at like 8 o'clock or whenever it is, and it happens. And if it doesn't happen, you can do research like instruments of torture in the late 50s. Or read or book.
How do I hide a body?
Yeah, really. Somebody was writing that the other day on Twitter, what they looked up, how much you pay someone to kill someone. All these crazy things we have to look up. Yeah. There's always research to do. Writing book reviews always helps another author, and it helps yourself get your name out there. But I'd say showing up at the same time in the same place with your music, with whatever it takes, your candle, lights, whatever it takes to get you in the mood, at the same time every day, just having that date with yourself is the most important thing, and it'll get done if it has your name on it. I think some people think they're supposed to, and something else has their name on it. And if you think you should write a book, I think everybody, if they want to, I think anybody should write a book, even if it's awful.
Right.
Those shouldn't necessarily get published, but if somebody feels like they have a book in them, I think they should write it, even if it's terrible.
I love it. Thank you. When you take the time to read for yourself, what are your favorite authors and genres?
Well, my two favorite authors are Kathleen McGowan and Dan Brown. Kathleen wrote The Expected One and The Poet Prince, and historical, revisionary history is how I would put hers. And then Dan Brown takes old beliefs and turns them on their head in an action adventure story, and I love that. And just recently I read Where the Crawdads Sing. I love that book. Oh my God, it's so wonderful, such outstanding book. And now I'm reading Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate, and that's a great book too. I'm about halfway done with it. I do like to read in my genre, which is primarily women's fiction, and step outside like Dan Brown every now and again.
Sure. Yeah, you gotta have some variety in there. Dan Brown's books always crack me up because you can have, you can sit down, I'm just gonna read a chapter. Well, a chapter is a sentence sometimes. It's like, well, maybe I'll read 2 chapters.
Right.
It actually, sometimes I feel it's a little, I don't know if it's distracting, but I'm like, really? There's only one sentence on this page.
Sometimes it feels a little disjointed, but it certainly keeps the speedy flow going. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you can read them very quickly. So I know that you have a website. If you can tell people where to find your website, as well as any social media that you're on that they might be able to interact with you.
Sure. My website is anncrawford.net, and there's no E on Ann, just A-N-N, and then Crawford, like Cindy Crawford, .net, and that's where my blog is. And you can also see my movies and books and stuff on there. My latest blog was about when I interviewed Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist author and teacher. Oh, what a wonderful man he is. I went to Plum Village on one of my round the world journeys. I was traveling around the world interviewing people how we could make peace. And we stopped in Plum Village, France, where Thich Nhat Hanh lives, and interviewed him and filmed him doing a Dharma talk and a walking meditation. So I wrote about that. That's my latest blog. And then on Instagram, I'm madly in love with Instagram. I have so much fun on there. It's all color codes. If you look at
nice.
if you scroll through my checkerboard, there's a method to all those colors, and I just have so much fun on there. And I'm at Ann Crawford Author on Instagram, and then Twitter is A Crawford Books, and then Facebook is just basically Ann Crawford. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, yes. I had to go to your Instagram to find out. That is some fun. So bright. It's attention grabbing.
Oh my goodness, it's so much fun. I've been doing it for about a year, and it's like one of the highlights of my day.
So you go ahead and finish this interview on your own. I'm just going to scroll through your Instagram. Wow.
Really
okay, I'm going to have
fun.
to look at that later. It is fun. But thank you for your social media handles. We've talked about a few different things today, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to bring up about writing or any of your books, especially Life in the Hollywood Lane, anything at all that we haven't covered?
Well, a year ago, I was at the awards ceremony in Miami, so I posted about that on Instagram today. That was the fall of 2019 was one of the highlights of my life, and ending with that awards ceremony. And I won the awards in visionary and inspirational fiction. And I say that, and it means spiritual but not religious. So that's kind of where my books are at. They're very uplifting and thought-provoking and fun and deep. So, yeah.
Which actually, let me ask a quick follow-up question about the book with, that you were doing the medieval torture device research for and Burning Witches. Did you work humor into that one too?
I did. There actually is some humor, and there's a lot of light. I try to shine as much light in dark places as I can. And the woman I wrote about just was such a remarkable woman in a crazy time, and it's definitely worth reading, even given the subject.
Okay.
I did not want to write that book. Oh my goodness. That's when I chunked it down to 10 minutes. I didn't want to finish it, but she wouldn't leave me alone. That's another thing authors often talk about, all these characters showing up and like having conversations without you. And Catriona, first of all, I wanted to change her name after Outlander got really popular because her name, and she was like, oh no, that's my name, and she pronounces it differently. So, but she would not leave me alone, and I finally just wrote the really hard part first to get them out of the way. And then I said, okay, just work on it 10 minutes a day. And of course, 10 minutes goes into 1 hour, 2 hours, lots longer. The main thing was just getting started. And it's not a very long book, but I did finish it. And that's a big accomplishment for me, because it was very hard to write, but I did it.
You did. See, there you go. And that's something else that you mentioned, that it's not a very long book. Life in the Hollywood Lane is, 154 pages. And then I was looking at the Fresh Off the Starship. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And that one was like 160 something pages or something. So do you typically write in this shorter, more novella type length?
I do, although the latest one about the 3 generations of women, that's long. It's over 100,000 words. So that's like 300, 350 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional publishers want at least that long, or at least 70,000 words. So I had to go long, and it's worth it.
Yeah. With that kind of subject matter, I'm sure there's plenty to have that, the longer book. But what I was going to say is that, for people who love to read, or even people maybe who are a little intimidated by reading, the length of your books is, it might be, it's less intimidating to pick up a book that doesn't weigh 15 pounds. And then, that with it is fast paced. It does have a lot of humor. I think that it would be, I am trying to compliment you here. I'm not making sense, but I feel like this would be a great book for people who either are really busy or maybe are a little intimidated by reading,
or want to read something in a Saturday afternoon or something. The husband of a friend of mine read Fresh Off the Starship, and he's not a reader, and he said she can write in a way that is easily understood, even if it's complex subjects. It's still very understandable. So I like that too, that it's quick and understandable. Yeah, that's a great compliment. So, well, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, not only about life in the Hollywood Lane, but about some of your other works. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you once again to Ann for coming on the podcast and taking the time to talk to me about her books, especially Life in the Hollywood Lane. It is, as I said, it is not a long read. It is a fast-paced, fun read. It deals with some things that are difficult, but in a way that has a lot of heart and a lot of warmth and a lot of humor. And so, this would be the perfect book to just pick up and read over your Thanksgiving, your long weekend, because you can definitely read this over a couple of days. Or if you're like my mother, you'll probably read it in like 2 hours. But we can't all be like my mother, who reads a book a day. And yeah, makes me a little bit jealous, but she's cool that way. Anyway. Thank you again to Ann. Thank you, as always, to you, my listeners. I hope that you are having a wonderful week. If you are a fan of this podcast, this is that time when I say, please do leave us a nice review, written, 5-star, whatever seems appropriate to you. Please do also follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, GSMC Book Review. Love to hear from listeners and interact with me. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're reading. All of those good things that I love to hear. Again, hope you're having a great week. Please join me again on Friday when I will be speaking with author Hank Philippi. It's either Philippi or Philippi. Philippi, probably. Ryan. I'll have to double check with her on how she pronounces that second name. About her book, Lie to Me. It is suspense. So I will leave you in suspense about what it is about until Friday. But please do join me for that interview with Hank. Also, please have a wonderful Thanksgiving, as well as a safe Thanksgiving. Please do be safe. We are getting so close to hopefully the end of this craziness, not only the end of 2020, but hopefully the end of COVID and the coming of vaccines. So please be safe and enjoy however you choose to then spend your holiday. We're going to be spending it, my husband and I, on video conference with our family. So we still get to see them. We just don't get to hug them. And it's not okay, but it's okay. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope that your long weekend involves plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.